Is death something we should fear? Have you ever jolted awake in the dead of night, heart pounding, haunted by a single chilling thought? One day, you will die. In that quiet darkness when the world is still and your mind wanders to the unknown, the fear can feel overwhelming. The realization hits that everything you are, every memory, every love, every dream, could someday vanish. It's a moment of raw terror, a feeling of helplessness before the inevitable. In those moments, it's natural to ask, is death something we should truly fear? Death is one of the few universals of the human experience. Every person who has ever lived, every friend, every family member, every hero or villain, every stranger on the street, and every face in the photographs of history, each one either has faced or will face the end of life. Yet, for something so certain, so much a part of our existence, we rarely talk about it openly. We tiptoe around the subject. We use gentle euphemisms. Someone passed away or gone to a better place. We avoid thinking about it, as if ignoring death might make it go away, but deep down we know it won't. And so, often quietly, in moments we're alone with our thoughts, we feel that familiar chill of mortal fear. It's no secret why we fear death. From an evolutionary perspective, fear is a survival mechanism. Our ancestors who had a healthy fear of cliff edges or predators lived longer to pass on their genes. We are programmed to avoid danger and, ultimately, to avoid death. The fear of dying is, in one sense, the most natural fear of all. It keeps us alive. If you're standing at the edge of a high balcony and feel your stomach lurch at the thought of falling, that's your built-in defense system saying, "Step back." In that way, fear of death has a purpose. It protects the fragile, precious life within us. But beyond those immediate dangers, there's another kind of fear of death that lurks in the back of our minds. It's not the jolt of panic that saves us from a fall or a speeding car. It's the quieter, lingering dread that comes when we contemplate the fact that our life will one day end, no matter what we do. It's the understanding that time is flowing, and one day it will run out. This is that deep fear, the one that can cast a shadow over our happiest moments if we let it. Under a beautiful sunset or a laughter-filled dinner with friends, a small voice might whisper, "How many more of these do I get? What happens when they're all gone?" So, is that shadow inevitable? Is it something we just have to live with, this constant low hum of fear? Or is there a way to face the reality of death without being paralyzed by it? People have grappled with these questions for thousands of years. Philosophers, spiritual leaders, and ordinary folks sitting by the fire have all pondered. Should we fear death? Or is there another way to think about it? One of the earliest voices on this topic comes from the ancient world. The Greek philosopher Epicurus, who lived over 2,300 years ago, had a famous idea about death. He told his followers something surprisingly simple. We don't need to fear death at all. Why? Epicurus argued that when we are alive, death is not here, and when death arrives, we are gone. In other words, as long as we exist, we aren't dead, and when we are dead, we won't be around to feel or fear anything. He pointed out that we didn't feel anything before we were born, and being dead will be like that too. Think about the vast stretch of time before you were born. You weren't here, and you weren't sitting around in some void, feeling anxious or sad about not existing. You simply weren't. Epicurus would say, just as you feel no pain or fear about the time before you existed, you need not fear the time after you're gone. At first, this idea might sound a bit blunt or cold. After all, it addresses death in a very matter-of-fact way, almost like a technical issue. And for many of us, the fear of death isn't just about whether we'll feel anything after we die. It's about the loss of life, of not experiencing the world anymore, of leaving behind people we love, or simply the terror of the unknown. Yet Epicurus's perspective can be strangely comforting if we sit with it for a moment. He is reminding us that the state of being dead is not something that should frighten us, because it is a state of nothingness, no pain, no worry, no fear. The real pain is in the anticipation, in the fear itself. Let's consider that. How much of our fear of death comes from anticipation, from imagining scenarios and outcomes that we actually never experience? It's like a child afraid of the dark, picturing monsters in the closet. The room is quiet and empty, but in the child's mind it's full of terrors. We too fill the unknown of death with all sorts of fears. We imagine it as this dreadful, horrifying event. But the truth is, none of us living has experienced death. And when we do experience it, we won't be here to tell anyone what it was like. So, in a sense, fearing the state of being dead is like fearing an imaginary monster. The monster might loom in our thoughts, but when the moment finally comes, according to Epicurus, we won't even know it. Now, some might say, okay, maybe I don't fear being dead in the sense of feeling pain after I'm gone, but I do fear the process of dying. I fear how it might happen, and I fear leaving behind the people I love and the life I know. This is a very honest and human reaction. Often when we say we fear death, we bundle a lot of other fears with it. Fear of pain, fear of the unknown, fear of loss. These are fears that deserve compassion and understanding. It's natural to worry about how we will go. Will it hurt? Will it be sudden, or will I have time to say goodbye? These uncertainties can trouble us deeply. And then there's the fear of loss. Not our own loss, but the loss others will feel, or the loss we feel at others' passing. We fear death when we think of our family, our children, our friends. We don't want to cause them pain by leaving, and we cannot bear the thought of losing them either. Death is intertwined with love in that way. We fear for others as much as for ourselves. This is an important point. Some of our fear around death isn't about death itself, but about grief and separation. It shows how much we care. The deeper the love, the deeper the worry about losing that person or about them losing us. So how can we reframe all these fears? How can we approach death differently so that we live our lives not under a cloud of dread, but in a state of acceptance and even peace? Many wise people have tried to answer this. Another ancient philosopher, the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius, wrote in his journal, "It is not death that a man should fear, but he should fear never beginning to live." What does that mean? Perhaps Aurelius understood that the real tragedy is not that life ends one day, but that sometimes we don't live while we have the chance. If we spend our days so worried about the end that we never truly begin our journey, then death wins long before it arrives. The fear of death can steal life from us, bit by bit, as we shrink from experiences out of anxiety. Imagine standing on a beach, wanting to swim in the ocean, but being so afraid of sharks that you never step into the water. Yes, a shark attack is possible, but extremely unlikely. Yet if your fear is too great, you'll miss the cool waves, the sun on your skin, the joy of floating and diving. In protecting yourself from a possible danger, you lose something precious and real. In a similar way, if we are so afraid of dying that we never truly live, never love deeply, never take chances, never pursue our dreams, then we suffer a kind of living death. We miss the ocean of life for fear of its risks. This brings us to a powerful truth. Fear of death often has a flip side, a fear of life. As the writer Mark Twain once observed, "The fear of death follows from the fear of life. A man who lives fully is prepared to die at any time. When you are truly living fully, you are absorbed in the moment, in the experience, not constantly looking over your shoulder at the shadow of death. It doesn't mean you want to die or that you don't value life. Quite the opposite. It means you are so engaged in living that you're not preoccupied with worrying about the end of it. Think about times when you've been really swept up in life, laughing with friends until your sides hurt, or working passionately on a project, or traveling somewhere new and breathtaking. In those moments, fear of anything is far away. You're certainly not thinking about your mortality. You're too busy being alive. So how do we reach a state where we live fully and accept death when it comes? One approach many cultures and philosophies suggest is to regularly remind ourselves of death in a gentle, reflective way, not to be morbid, but to make life sweeter. It might sound counterintuitive. Why think about something scary on purpose? The Stoic philosophers of ancient Greece and Rome had a practice called memento mori, which is Latin for remember that you will die. They believed that by keeping the inevitability of death in mind, they could focus on what truly matters each day. It wasn't meant to be depressing, but rather enlightening. If you wake up each morning and say to yourself, "I am mortal, and one day I will not be here," it could make you realize that each hour is a gift. Petty worries, grudges, and distractions might start to fall away. You might find it easier to forgive, to tell people you love them, to pursue what matters, because you know time is precious. There's a story that illustrates this shift in perspective. Imagine for a moment a man who was consumed by money and success, who spent all his time working late at the office, saving for a future he was too busy to enjoy. He rarely took a holiday, seldom visited his family, and always said, "I'll do all that once I retire. I'll live life later." But then, one day, on a routine doctor's visit, he gets news he never expected. He has a serious illness and maybe only a year or two left to live. Suddenly, all his expensive cars and big house and bulging bank account mean far less to him. What wouldn't he give for more time, for a chance to finally go see the northern lights like he always dreamed, or to have long dinners with his best friends, or to watch his children grow up? In that moment, death is no longer an abstract thing far off in the future. It's real and near. The terror of it is there, yes, but something else happens too. In many cases, people in this situation feel a kind of clarity. They realize they want to spend whatever time is left in the most meaningful way possible. So this man might quit his job, travel with his wife, reconcile with an old friend, sit under the stars, and truly savor the life he has. The story is bittersweet. Why do we wait for a dire diagnosis to wake us up? Why not live like that now? None of us knows how long we have. We assume it's a long road ahead, but the truth is, life is unpredictable. This isn't meant to scare, but to remind. Since we cannot control the quantity of our time, we can at least control the quality of it. Instead of fearing the moment our time ends, we can focus on making the time we have count. It's also worth mentioning that not everyone views death with dread. Different cultures and individuals have found ways to make peace with it. For some, belief in an afterlife or a spiritual continuation provides comfort. The idea that death is a transition, not an end. If you deeply believe you'll go to a heaven or be reborn in another life or merge with the universe, then death might seem less like losing everything and more like going home or starting anew. Even if one does not hold these beliefs, there is something we can learn from them. The theme of continuity and connection. Many spiritual perspectives suggest that what we really are, whether you call it a soul, consciousness, or simply the love we've shared, doesn't vanish. It transforms or lives on in some form. Now, let's step away from grand philosophy for a moment and look at nature for guidance. Nature has countless lessons about life and death and renewal. Consider the seasons. Every autumn, the trees let go of their leaves. If you didn't know better, you might think the tree is dying when you see it standing there all bare in the winter snow. But come spring, there's rebirth. Fresh leaves, new blossoms, life starting over. The tree wasn't dead, it was resting, preparing for a new cycle. Or consider a simple butterfly. To become a butterfly, a caterpillar must effectively die to its old self, wrapping into a cocoon, dissolving, and emerging as something new and beautiful. If the caterpillar could think like we do, it might be terrified. Everything it has known is ending. But we know this transformation is not an end, it's a new beginning. Now, consider a small, simple story, closer to everyday life. The story of a little leaf on a tree. This leaf spent its spring and summer basking in the sun, turning light into nourishment for the tree. It watched the birds nest on the branches and felt the warm breeze. But as autumn came, the days grew shorter and the air colder. The leaf realized its time was nearing an end. It clung a little tighter to the branch, afraid of what would happen if it let go. It had never fallen before. The unknown was scary. One by one, the leaf saw its fellow leaves gently detach and drift to the ground. "Is this the end of me?" the leaf wondered, trembling. Finally, the day came when the wind was just strong enough. The leaf was torn from the branch. For a moment, it panicked as it fell, the world a blur of motion. But then something unexpected happened. The leaf began to float gracefully, carried by the wind, dancing through the autumn air. It was actually peaceful. The sky had never looked so vast, nor the sun so kind. Eventually, the leaf came to rest on the forest floor, among many other leaves that formed a soft blanket over the earth. The leaf was no longer green and vibrant, true, but it found that this next chapter was not frightening. Over the weeks, it slowly turned to soil, and that soil nourished the roots of the great tree it once called home. By the next spring, the leaf, now part of the earth, helped new buds open and new leaves grow. In this way, the leaf realized that while its form changed, it remained part of something ongoing. Its life had mattered. It contributed to life continuing on. This story is a gentle reminder, in symbolic form, that death often isn't a stark, meaningless end, but a transformation. The leaf's fear was natural, just as ours is. But in the end, the very thing it feared was what allowed new life to come forth. The leaf returned to the cycle of nature, just as we all will. When we see ourselves in that leaf, perhaps we can find a little courage and comfort. We too are part of a larger story, the story of life itself. And our death will also have meaning in ways we may not fully understand now. It's okay to still feel uneasy about death. Accepting or not fearing death doesn't mean never feeling sad or anxious when we think about it. Those emotions are part of being human. But we can try to let those feelings remind us to live better rather than letting them paralyze us. Every time you feel that pang of fear about the end, you can use it as a nudge. Am I living the life I want to live right now? What if I use this moment while I am alive and breathing to do something that matters to me, to connect with someone I care about, to experience something fully? In fact, people who have had close calls with death often report a change in how they live afterward. A near-death experience, like a car accident, a sudden illness, or any brush with mortality, can be a harsh teacher. But many say it taught them an important lesson, that they had been taking life for granted. After facing death and surviving, they sometimes lose their fear of it. Instead of living in fear, they start living with gratitude. Every sunrise looks a little brighter. They tell their loved ones, "I love you," more often. They aren't as bothered by the small annoyances that used to drive them crazy. The noise of life's little problems quiets down, and what truly matters, family, friends, love, creativity, whatever it is, comes forward in brilliant clarity. We don't all need to have a near-death experience to gain that perspective. We can learn from those who have had them. We can realize right now that our time is limited and let that guide us to be bolder and more loving. There is also the aspect of legacy and memory. Maybe part of our fear is that we will be forgotten, that our life won't have meant anything. But think of the people you've lost in your own life, whether a family member or a friend. Do you remember them with fear? Or do you remember them with love, with gratitude for the time you shared? Often it's the love and moments shared that stay with us, not the fact that they died. In that sense, those we love never completely leave us. We carry them in our hearts, in our actions, in the way they changed us. If you're worried about being forgotten, consider that every act of kindness, every friendship, every piece of art or work you put into the world becomes a part of others. That's a kind of immortality. No, our bodies don't last, but the ripples of our life spread outward in ways we often don't see. A teacher might inspire a student, who then becomes a great scientist thanks to that inspiration. A parent loves a child, who carries that love forward to their own children. You might smile at a stranger who is having a hard day, and that could change their day completely. Perhaps even save a life by restoring their hope. These things matter. They are the threads weaving the tapestry of humanity. Death can't take those impacts away once they've happened. So, is death something we should fear? Perhaps not in the way we often do. It's normal to fear the unknown, and it's human to not want life to end. But maybe instead of fearing death, we can respect it. We can see it as the natural closing of a chapter, something that gives our story shape and urgency. Imagine if life went on forever for everyone. Would we feel the same drive to achieve goals, to mend broken relationships, to savor the beauty around us? Oddly, death adds value to life by making it scarce. A rare flower that blooms only once a year might be cherished more than one that blooms every day. In the same way, knowing that our time is finite can inspire us to make the most of it. Each moment becomes more meaningful because we know it is one of a limited number. What if, rather than a dreaded enemy, death is a teacher? It teaches us that every hello eventually has a goodbye, so we should take nothing for granted. It teaches us that we have to let go, so maybe we should loosen our grip on petty things and grudges. It teaches us that we are all the same in the end. No matter our differences in life, we all share this fate, so perhaps we should be more compassionate to one another. This doesn't mean we start loving death or that we welcome it eagerly. Valuing life means we naturally cling to it. But there is a balance we can strike. To love life so much that we live it fully, and to respect death enough that we accept it when it comes. Acceptance is a key word. Fear often comes from resistance, from saying, "No, I don't want this." But acceptance is like a releasing breath, a gentle nod that says, "Yes, this is part of the deal." When you accept something, it loses some of its terror. Think of getting a shot at the doctor. Tensing up and dreading it often makes it worse than it actually is. If you take a breath and accept that a brief pain is coming, you often find it wasn't as bad as fear made it out to be. Standing here, alive, heart beating, lungs breathing, you have the luxury of contemplating death from a distance. One day, that distance will close, but you have between now and then to fill with living. You have sunsets to watch, people to meet, love to give and receive, things to create and lessons to learn. The question, should we fear death, might best be answered by another question. How should we live? If we choose to live in fear, then we experience a little death every day in our anxiety. But if we choose to live fully, then when death finally comes, maybe we can meet it more peacefully, like an old friend who has walked with us all our lives, always reminding us to value each moment. We started with that image of you lying awake at night, struck by the fear of your life ending. Let's return to that moment now, but with a new perspective. Yes, one day you will die, but that is precisely why today you should live. Instead of letting the fear grip you, let it remind you gently that you have things to do in this world, gifts to give, and experiences to cherish. The fact that life is short can motivate us to make it sweet. Smile at a stranger who is having a hard day, and that could change their day completely, perhaps even save a life by restoring their hope. These things matter. They are the threads weaving the tapestry of humanity. Death can't take those impacts away once they've happened. So, is death something we should fear? Perhaps not in the way we often do. It's normal to fear the unknown, and it's human to not want life to end. But maybe instead of fearing death, we can respect it. We can see it as the natural closing of a chapter, something that gives our story shape and urgency. Imagine if life went on forever for everyone. Would we feel the same drive to achieve goals, to mend broken relationships, to savor the beauty around us? Oddly, death adds value to life by making it scarce. A rare flower that blooms only once a year might be cherished more than one that blooms every day. In the same way, knowing that our time is finite can inspire us to make the most of it. Each moment becomes more meaningful because we know it is one of a limited number. What if, rather than a dreaded enemy, death is a teacher? It teaches us that every hello eventually has a goodbye, so we should take nothing for granted. It teaches us that we have to let go, so maybe we should loosen our grip on petty things and grudges. It teaches us that we are all the same in the end. No matter our differences in life, we all share this fate, so perhaps we should be more compassionate to one another. This doesn't mean we start loving death or that we welcome it eagerly. Valuing life means we naturally cling to it. But there is a balance we can strike, to love life so much that we live it fully, and to respect death enough that we accept it when it comes. Acceptance is a key word. Fear often comes from resistance, from saying, "No, I don't want this." But acceptance is like a releasing breath, a gentle nod that says, "Yes, this is part of the deal." When you accept something, it loses some of its terror. Think of getting a shot at the doctor. Tensing up and dreading it often makes it worse than it actually is. If you take a breath and accept that a brief pain is coming, you often find it wasn't as bad as fear made it out to be. Standing here, alive, heart beating, lungs breathing, you have the luxury of contemplating death from a distance. One day that distance will close, but you have between now and then to fill with living. You have sunsets to watch, people to meet, love to give and receive, things to create and lessons to learn. The question, should we fear death, might best be answered by another question. How should we live? If we choose to live in fear, then we experience a little death every day in our anxiety. But if we choose to live fully, then when death finally comes, maybe we can meet it more peacefully, like an old friend who has walked with us all our lives, always reminding us to value each moment. We started with that image of you lying awake at night, struck by the fear of your life ending. Let's return to that moment now, but with a new perspective. Yes, one day you will die, but that is precisely why today you should live. Instead of letting the fear grip you, let it remind you gently that you have things to do in this world, gifts to give, and experiences to cherish. The fact that life is short can motivate us to make it sweet.